Good evening. Hi, my name is Kathy Kalashevsky. I am the Artistic Director for Freak Film Festival. You are here tonight for a wonderful conversation about a wonderful film, Los Hermanos, The Brothers. That is going to be part of a bigger weekend of events that you're going to hear more about in just a minute. If this is your first Freak Film Festival event, we are the documentary-based festival here in Detroit. We're scheduled for this fall, September 22nd through the 26th. We've got an amazing slate of documentaries that are relevant and resonate here in Detroit, Michigan, the region, and much of the Midwest. It's going to feature films much like what you're going to see in the film Los Hermanos. Tonight, as part of our monthly screening series, you're in a treat because we are pleased to have the two main subjects of the film, the directors and art and music critic Mark Stryker, in conversation. But first, I want to bring in Steve Wagaman. He's the president of the Chamber Music Society of Detroit, who's going to kick off this evening and tell us about the wonderful weekend of film, music, and conversation. Hi, Steve.
Hi, Kathy. Yes, it's going to be a wonderful weekend. And of course, if you just saw the film, it has already started for you. But we're presenting Aldo and Ilmar together in our first public concert at the Flagstar Strand Theater in Pontiac. That's a venue we have never used before, and it's a lovely, lovely space. Aldo and Ilmar bring this amazing music to us. All of it by Aldo and part of it arranged in collaboration with Ilmar. And so people who have purchased a ticket to the concert are actually able to see the film as well. And those who saw the film and perhaps haven't seen the concert yet, just go to cmsdetroit.org and you'll find a ticket, or chambermusicdetroit.org. Either one will get you there. But it will be a socially distanced concert with no intermission. And so we'll invite people to come in through the very small lobby, go immediately to their seats with a row separating people forward and back and 3 seats side to side. And then as soon as the concert's over, we ask everyone to leave quickly after the standing ovation. Evola Music has brought in this incredible piano, a Shigeru Kawai concert grand piano. There are only 20 of them made in the world each year, and that's what Aldo will be playing. And we're, of course, streaming it live. So if coming out to a concert isn't yet your thing, you can come and at the same place, you can find a digital ticket and watch the live stream concert.
Excellent. Well, we're going to kick it off to Mark, who's going to bring in the directors and the two subjects from the film, to talk a little bit about kind of what this film is about and what inspired this amazing concert happening up in Pontiac this weekend.
Well, thank you, Kathy and Steve, for having me here to lead this conversation. It was a terrific film. I'm thrilled to be here, and I will bring in our distinguished panelists. First, the co-directors of the film, Marcia Jarmel and Ken Schneider, and there they are. And then let's bring in the brothers, Ilmar Gavilán and Aldo López-Gavilán. I don't need to tell you anything more about them because I feel like at this point we're all sort of family. At least we think of them as family now. I'd like to start, I think, with Marcia and Ken, and then we'll come to the brothers here in a moment. But I'd like, if you could tell us what led you to this film. I understand Ken has a family connection to Cuba, and this is your fourth film relating to Cuba. So obviously there's a journey here that has happened. And so I'm wondering if you could sort of get us up to speed about that. And then from there, how you met the brothers and decided this would be a film for you to make.
Well, the short version of the film's origin story, Mark, starts with the presentation of our first Cuba film at the Havana Film Festival. And the closing night of Havana Film Festival coincides with the opening night of the Havana Jazz Festival, at least back in 2014. So a friend of mine told me I should go, a Cuban friend told me I had to go see opening night. And I went, and there was this 30-something wild-haired pianist who was on stage with all of his great musical friends. There were percussionists, there was a trap drummer, there were guitarists. They came on and off, and I'm a music guy, and I'd never experienced or felt piano music like this before. So after the concert, I went to the garden where the players were eating and drinking, and I ordered a mojito, and I introduced myself, and I was very taken with him and his family. And I went home to San Francisco because Marsha was not on that trip with me, and I said, "Hey, we've been wanting to make a film about the arts in Cuba. I think I found it." And I told her about the piano playing of Aldo López-Gavilán, and she said to me, "Great, what's the story?"
And then we had the really good fortune to meet Ilmar in New York when we were screening a film there, and just had a very nice connect immediately. And at the end of our meal, he said, you know, Aldo's coming. He's going to play with our quartet for the first time, and we're going to tour. And we did not know that. And Ken and I looked at each other and said, okay, that's a story. We don't know what's going to happen, but something will, and that's worth following. So that was kind of the launch of the film.
And Mark, just one more bit of context about that is that this particular meeting of Aldo traveling to the U.S. to tour with Ilmar and his wonderful Harlem Quartet could not have happened a few months earlier because there was a tiny window. We didn't know at the time it was tiny, but there was about an 18-month window where President Obama loosened the restrictions and made it easier for Cubans to travel here and obtain the kind of visa that would allow Aldo to perform. And of course, that door, which was cracked open by President Obama, was slammed shut a little bit later by President Trump. So that was the moment when we picked up the camera.
I can imagine. I'm a journalist. You're filmmakers. We're all storytellers, and I know what it feels like to be in that moment where you meet somebody, you make all of a sudden two synapses make a connection, and you're like, "This is a film. This is a story." Was it that quickly with them?
Kind of, actually. I mean, the interest was there. We had been making films, as you said, for quite a few years in Cuba, on and off, mostly in the art space. So we were interested in in looking at Cuba and the U.S. through that lens, and then this was just the perfect vehicle for that exploration.
I wonder how difficult was it to make the film in the context of the ever-shifting strands of Cuban-American relations, the embargo. You've done a lot of work in Cuba. So was this different than that in some ways, or did this have special challenges?
Well, there's two things about that. One thing, Mark, is that whenever we travel to Cuba and make a film, we do not travel with a crew or equipment. We work with local Cuban talent. And there's a lot of great artists there in every medium, including filmmaking. So we try to have as gentle a footprint as possible, and our crew members are among our closest friends on the island. And they help us navigate. They help us understand logistics and travel times and where to get food and to navigate if there's any tricky issues. So we've never had any problems on the Cuban side. The challenges we've had are on our side, because the visa restrictions have changed a lot over the 10 years we've been traveling there. And, Marsha and I have traveled to Cuba pretty much every which way but swimming across the Florida Straits. We've taken direct flights. I've been on a charter flight from New York. We've traveled through Mexico. We've obtained journalist visas. We've obtained person-to-person visas, which are no longer available. So the challenge has been getting the permission to travel from this side. And in terms of, was it a difficult film to make? To be honest, they all are. They all have their challenges.
Of course. I want to bring in Ilmar and Aldo now, and I wanted to ask, or sort of start with you in this way. One of the themes of the film is the idea of a kind of cultural dislocation. And yet, for all performing artists, this last year has been one long year of dislocation as you've not been able to perform for in-person audiences. And so before we even get to the film and all of that, I just wonder, as performers, what has this last year been like for you, not being able to play in public, and to see that question from Ilmar from your side in New York and Aldo from your side in Cuba. What's it been like?
Well, as you probably know, and most of artists, performers, it was a big change in our lives. Used to perform quite often, regularly, to staying at home. It was a big challenge, but in the other hand, it was good, especially when you are a creator, when you are a composer, like my case. Usually it's hard to find the time to get inspired and get to compose and write music. Not only because of the inspiration, but because of the commitment you have as a performer. In this case, it was, plenty of time to compose and to rethink about your creativity. And that's what I use it for, like you can expect. Although I didn't compose a lot, I did find different places in my creation. And I revised most of my older works. And of course, I did new music, and I'm still doing new music. And also learning different ways of using the technologies at home, like filming, editing, of course, recording and music editing, knowing a little bit of different apps. And that was really interesting and very opening, different aspects of our creativity skills. And I think it's been very productive in that sense. Not even, of course, the familiar side is also a very important point. I mean, having the time that you probably never have for enjoying family with quality time, with the kids, with my parents, with my wife, being home, cooking and having nice dinners, lunch, and all these kind of wonderful times. Despite all of course, the crises and all these terrible things that you all know that's been happening in the whole world with this virus. But I always think positive, and I think it's been a good moment for reflection and expanding your knowledge.
I suspect for artists that over time, the effects of a year like this, those will reveal themselves. They won't all reveal themselves all at once. That'll sort of slowly maybe germinate. You might see the effects of this in your own music, down the road. Ilmar, for you in New York, not as a composer, but as a player and a teacher, with a string quartet and on your own, what has this been like?
In the beginning, it was a really, really tough. Psychologically, it was just amazing to see all of these concerts from the calendar disappearing. It was really like a very tense, full of unknown. And then, as Aldo was saying, we started adapt to the circumstances. Everybody in the quartet found something to occupy themselves with. In my case, I put a lot of energy in my kids. They both, now the boy's 10. He was really small in the movie. Now he's 10. He's playing viola. and the girl, she's 12 now, and she's at Juilliard pre-college. So I was helping her with everything related to her piano and theory and all kinds of things that make me study a little harder. Because, you know, when is the last time we checked like a theory book or something, right? So it's a lot of like, I feel a lot of what's that? Like the farmers put the seed in the ground. A lot of, you know, planting this year, reading, doing things that you don't have time to do usually. But I'm not gonna lie, the first 6 months were really terrifying. Like, what's happening? And now we're lucky to be in the other side. I believe most musicians are getting slowly back to normal, including Harlem Quartet.
Yeah, I imagine for Marcia and Ken, the timeline of creating a film and the build up to finishing the editing and the premiere and all that stuff, and then suddenly for that to go poof, because we should have been doing this a year ago, basically. It must have been very difficult for you guys too, yes?
You know, terrifically disappointing. I mean, we were supposed to premiere at Freep last April, and there was going to be a concert, and, you know, all of this, you know, wonderful stuff was all going to happen. And here we are, we're over a year later, and we have never heard our soundtrack in a theater. The only one of us who ever has is you, Aldo, in Havana, because there was a screening in a theater there in December, but we couldn't go. So that's just been it's been hard. It's been hard not to be able to communicate with our audience. So we're excited about this, and next week our film's going to be open in theaters. Some of them are live in theater presentations. So we're super excited about that. But you got it. Terribly disappointing.
Aldo and Ilmar, what is it like to see yourself up on a big screen? Not all of us get that experience. Sometimes we get to see ourselves on a small screen, as we're all looking at small screens here. But on a big screen and in a film, what is that experience like for you both?
Well, Aldo, you told me your experience. So the movie was premiered in pretty much the biggest theater we have in Havana. I mean, yes. Havana has few theaters, but this particular one, like I went there as a teenager, you know, on dates and stuff. So I know it's a big deal right in the heart of Havana. And you told me, how many tickets did you buy?
Half the theater.
Half the theater, like 200 tickets or something. Of course, in Cuba, it's a lot cheaper than here. But just to have tickets for the families and friends, and socially distanced too. And you said people clap and everything afterwards?
Oh, it was very emotional, very emotional. Not only the family, the half of the theater that was family, but many other people, friends and colleagues and public in general. They really enjoyed it, and they were very touched by the film, and it's a fantastic experience. I mean, clapping, and I had to stand like I did something. I did nothing. And of course, the big screen and the big sound is a great experience. It's very, very good.
I had a chance in Woodstock, and Marcia and Ken, we all went there. My family was there. The little kids were on top of the car, and I saw a bunch of people taking pictures of my kids on top of the car with a blanket, because it reminds them of the old days of Woodstock, I guess. I know it wasn't an indoor theater, but I thought it's great. I had a great time seeing it in a big screen. Relatively good sound. You agree, guys? Ken and Marcia, pretty good.
Well, depends on your car.
That's true. But I do have a good speakers in my car.
You know, for us too, Ilmar, the drive-in was like a dream experience, and seeing your two kids sitting on top of the car watching, that was a total delight. But going back to Mark's question, you know, our other sort of sorrow, and is we have, not only does the film have beautiful music, but we have a beautiful sound mix. and we can't wait until next Friday, May 14th, when we have our national opening. And Marsh and I will be in Los Angeles hosting our opening weekend, and hopefully, as many Angelinos who want to will be able to see the film and experience Aldo and Ilmar's gorgeous music in a way it deserves to be seen, with a 5.1 mix in a great theater. And I think that'll be a real sort of, reckoning moment for us.
Aldo and Ilmar, I was wondering, so there was the process of making the film, and of course you're not making the film, you're in the film, and you have an idea, I assume, of sort of what the story is being told and what it's going to say and how it's going to look like. But then you have this opportunity to see it now fully done and finished. And I wonder if, when you see it now, if it matches your expectations, or are there things about your story that became clearer to you, let's say, because you've been able to see it in a movie?
Absolutely. I that's exactly what I think. I realized many aspects of our lives because of this movie. Otherwise, I think that happened, but you don't really understand the connotation of it and the results of many experiences.
Yeah, no, for me also it was precious beyond measure to rescue some of the old pictures,
Yes.
the old videos that it was full of. It was just basically destroyed, and Marsh and Ken did a great job rescuing a bunch of stuff that are incredible. And it was a lot of fun, especially the part in Cuba, to travel there and visit, our first house with the neighbors, all of that. So many wonderful experiences. Yeah, and for me, the most impressive thing is how the music matches the movie. It took me a while to realize that all the music is either composed by a member of the family or performed by a member of the family. There is no music outside of that. It took me a while because some of the compositions I haven't heard in a while, and because it sounds so cinematic, sounds like a soundtrack. So it's just incredible that it's something that somebody in the family wrote, it's just incredible. And the sings match so much the music. That for me is a lot of fun.
Was there a moment, Ilmar, when that clicked for you, that you suddenly realized that, oh my gosh, everything I'm hearing is from the family?
Yes, there is a scene. We are getting in an old car, some of these 50s cars in Havana, and I hear a tune that is a band playing a very typical Cuban song called The Peanut Butter Vendor. And I hear a violin that is quite better than the typical sound of street bands. I was like, wow, this violin is good. Wait a minute, that's me. I'm like, I remember this recording long ago in LA. That was my first gig that I did in the United States to make some money. When I came to this country, I joined a Cuban band. And of course, I didn't forget about it. But I certainly didn't hear that band in a long time, that particular recording. And it sounded so perfect for the scene of the old cars in Havana. And I totally forgot that's that CD, and that's me playing it. That was great. And another awesome moment for me as music relating to the scene is when Aldo and I are arguing about why I left the airport. He said he would pick me up, and I left. And we're doing this thing with the hands, and we're playing this piece that has the stop and goes written in. And it was just so phenomenal. It's just one of many, places that really illustrate what I mean by matching.
Ken, Marsha, who's responsible for that?
Ken, definitely. We had an idea about that we were going for, but it's Ken's work as the editor.
Well, there is I love Ilmar's comment. There's an overarching idea with the structure of the film. We were thinking of this as a musical or as a musical suite, not formally as in, the planets or Peer Gynt, not, Alaman, Courant, Gig, but we wanted each cue to mirror and underline what was happening in both Aldo and Ilmar's lives at that point. So some music is more exuberance, some music has more anticipation, some music has some melancholy, and we did try to match, the music to the story, and that was fun and not always easy. And then there was the hard and kind of embarrassing moment where I sent Ilmar the cut, a rough cut, for his feedback, and he said, "Well, Ken, it's fine, but some of the music is out of sync." And we musicians, we roll our eyes at documentaries, at documentaries of music, and I passed this scene back and forth with Ilmar about a half a dozen times because he said, "Look, Aldo's hand is his left hand is playing, in the lower register, the piano, and I'm hearing high notes. You got to get that right." So you can only cheat so much when there's musicians who are your viewers, and it was important to us to get it right, both because the integrity of Aldo's music and because, of course, we want musicians to enjoy this. So that was a little bit embarrassing, but Ilmar didn't. He was very generous with me.
He didn't give up on us.
I think that even non-musicians, of course, when the music is not in sync, even if it's off just a little bit, people sense that as viewers, and over time, it's one of those little things that can accumulate and kind of throw you out of the movie. Obviously, if you know music, it drives you crazy. But I will say, speaking of the airport scene, that I learned a lot about this family, the Gavilán family. But one thing I learned in this film is don't have anybody from that family pick you up in an airport.
It's bad luck.
It didn't seem to work in either country.
Well, this is also a good film school moment, Mark, because we went to Havana with all of the, we had all the permits to shoot. We had our crew ready. We picked up Aldo at his house with his two twin daughters. They were excited. They're literally hopping and skipping to the van because they were going to see their cousins for the first time in years. And they're very connected, but because of the geopolitical divide, they don't get to play as much as they should. And so everything was working out perfectly. We had the anticipation, we had the buildup, and then of course it didn't happen. And when I got back home to Aldo's home, Ilmar whispered to me, "Ken, I'm so sorry. We really wanted to make this work. I'm so sorry." He felt really bad, and I said, "You know what? This is perfect. We could not have directed this. We couldn't have planned this. Just take care of your own business, and we'll run the camera." And it turned out that is one of the most delightful scenes, partially because it was completely out of our control, as all good documentary scenes are. You don't know what you're getting. You just know why you're there, but you don't know what's going to happen.
Right. Well, and you have to be there. If you're not there, you can't capture it.
That's the commitment.
And there's something I think very universal in the kind of brotherly dynamic in that particular moment that I think I think anyone who has siblings recognizes that moment.
Absolutely. There's a wonderful scene in the film in Havana where the whole family is at the kitchen table and everyone is playing percussion with their silverware, and they're banging on plates and glasses, and you can hear someone is playing a fast clave beat, a 2/3 clave, and you can hear everybody else is layering their rhythms on top. And it made me think of just how deeply rooted music is in the culture in Cuba, much more so, I think, than in the United States. And I wonder, Aldo and Ilmar, if you could talk a little bit about that, and just how important is music in the culture in Cuba, and is it different from the United States?
Well, it's music everywhere at all times. In the streets, the kids playing around on the street with cans and sticks, wooden sticks. and even when they play games like baseball or the running and hide and all these kind of kids playing, they always put some kind of song or rhythm to it, based on let's say rumba or salsa or conga. Is actually part of our lives. Is true. It's very natural. I think there is no a single person in Cuba that don't understand at in their own levels, but they get the feeling of the music, and they even can play any percussion at some point, the simplest or the complicated parts too, without knowing nothing about music. And I think it's also very relieving for Cubans. They express either their happiness or their sorrows through expressing through music, folk music or dance music, but they actually do. And I think there is not much different. I feel here in America, people also love music, and it's all over in the streets, in the houses, on the cars. I of course it's a different approach, different cultures and different ways of lives, but the love and the feeling for it, I think, is basically the same.
Yeah, I think so too. Perhaps Cuba is more Africanized, even though the population, I was reading up on it, it's only a third African actually. But the culture is very permeated with African rhythms. Like even in New Year's Eve, it's very typical to see neighbors come down with cooking ware and just hitting what we were doing with like a frying pan and a fork or a spoon, and somebody will lead and the rest will follow. And nobody organizes anything, but everybody has that beat. And honestly, that beat comes from Africa. So I think it has something to do with that. And in my family, this is something that since our grandpa, in the table, he would just start something soft, and we had rules to keep it soft and not to overcomplicate it, because then you lose the beat. And everybody just grew up with this, and we don't have to talk much. We just have to, feel it and keep adding layers to the overall rhythm. So yeah, it's great.
Yes, it's not only Africanized, as you say. Maybe that's what we feel because we were living in Havana.
Right.
But in the other cities or countryside,
Mm-hmm.
the kids they improvise with the
words,
music,
with the words,
and with the line melodies.
Yes.
And that's more like a Spanish influence thing.
Yeah, that's true.
And but they do it. Everybody do it in their own ways, depending on the families and the culture of their surroundings.
Well, I'm always, one of the things that I think about is that when I hear the popular music in Cuba, just how sophisticated it is to our ears in America rhythmically. If you compare what is popular music in Havana compared to popular music in the United States, it's no comparison about just the level of sophistication that's in the music that is just part of the culture. And you see that you're absolutely right. It's all part of the African diaspora. And that is the connection with African American music here in the States. But that's a lovely scene because I think it just it illustrates that so well. As filmmakers, you must, when something like that is happening, you just must be in heaven, right?
Well, so this is another good sort of film school moment. In our interviews, we had what's called master interviews with both Ilmar and Aldo fairly early on in our shooting. It's a good way to get to know each other, and they're both great raconteurs, both great storytellers, And Ilmar had mentioned in passing that's something that they do as a family. So of course, you know, we were very excited about the possibility of capturing that on film, and we knew that if we were making a whole scene out of them shopping and cooking, that maybe it would happen. But yes, you know, when it did happen, and when their father Guido took such joy, and the children, his grandchildren, so you have 3 generations taking such joy. And as you say, it is the pulse of both the street and the home and the shop. It's everywhere, and yeah, we were delighted to capture that.
There were quite a few moments in the film where we knew we had a film. We originally were going to make a short film when we started out, but the story was just so interesting, and kept sort of unfolding in such interesting ways that we kept going with it. And for sure, that is one of those moments where you know, you feel like, oh, you know, we have a film here, and you know, it's in the footage, the sort of story that we want to tell. We had a few of those. We were lucky in the storytelling.
Mark, I just want to say that you have a really good point about the sophistication of the popular music there, because here very often Cuban dance music is classified as Latin jazz. And I kept telling the people, no, this is not Latin jazz. People actually dance to this. It's like, really? To that beat? Because the beat is inconceivable that you can dance to. It's so syncopated and so, like, it surely must be Latin jazz. So no, this is what people really, and I had these conversations all the time. It's because the rhythm is very intricate, and it is very African. It's very African compared to most pop music. They have an African base, but it's kind of like simplified. I heard music of Africa, and it's complicated, like the Cuban way. So it is, I think, a big component of it.
So often, I wish that I was old enough to have gone to the Palladium in 1958, 59, heard Machito, heard this music as it came to America.
I see.
What that must have felt like.
What's amazing is when you're in Cuba, you see very young kids dancing to these very complicated rhythms, which I have to say Ken and I have not really quite mastered yet. But you know, 3-4-year-old kids are just moving to this music in this completely fluid way, and it's like it's just in the heartbeat.
Right, it's cultural. That's why I mean the musicology can only explain so much about music like this, because it runs so deep within the cultural expression of a place.
And Mark, you might not be able to go back and set your time machine for a Machito concert, but if you were to travel to Cuba today, you would have some, maybe you already have, some wonderful musical experiences.
I have not traveled to Cuba, and believe me, it's tops on my list. Marcia and Ken, there's obviously a political undertow throughout the film, and I wonder, how did you decide what role you wanted the ever-shifting politics of American-Cuban relations to play in the film, and how did you decide what to be explicit about and what to underplay and make those kinds of decisions?
Well, the film was always was not a specifically political film. I mean, that was a choice we made from the get-go, that many people have made. There are many films about politics between the U.S. and Cuba, but there would be no story if there weren't if we weren't in this political situation. So we had to do some of it, and so the foreground background. You know, that was the challenge, is, you know, how little can we get away with and still have people understand the context of the story that we're telling. And that was a lot of trial and error, I think.
Yeah, and you know, documentarians know, Mark, we can never keep pace with the news cycle. When you're on anything that has an issue attached to it, you know, you get a new president, somebody gets reelected or be defeated in Florida. In the case of Cuba, there's a new Congress. There's a new president. So that's not our jam. We really decided that in our Cuba work, we were going to root ourselves in the cultural space, and where politicians fail and where they erect rather than tear down walls, artists succeed, and they create works which unite us rather than divide us. So we had a very strong feeling that it wasn't prudent to go into a Cuba versus U.S., Castro versus Kennedy kind of thing. Those films exist. But what was foregrounded was the possibility of music to unite not only this family, but us as Americans and them as Cubans, and our Cuban American brethren and sistren who have a whole host of complicated relationships to Cuba, Cuban politics, and Cuban culture.
Mm-hmm. I mean, there is the line in the film, I've forgotten who says it, but that hearts and minds first, politics will follow, if it follows. But hearts and minds is what culture is about, and that's a very powerful thing in the film. I will say too, one of the other most powerful moments in the film for me, and maybe for many of us here in Detroit, is when we see Aldo and Ilmar in the car traveling through the streets of Detroit, and you see the devastation and the decay in Detroit. And one of you, I cannot remember which one, says, "This is worse. This is worse," referring to it's basically a direct comparison with what you're seeing, the devastation in Detroit versus the decay that you might see in Cuba over the decades. And it is a very without making a big deal about it, it's one of those moments in the film that really makes you it's something that has stuck with me, and I've thought about that line, that what is worse, or which is worse, or this is worse. I'm wondering for you, for Aldo and Ilmar, did this experience and making this film clarify or change your ideas about the way you look at the political situation between the United States and Cuba?
Actually, it was me, the one that said it worse to Aldo when we were seeing the abandoned houses, and I said it's worse because then you see the big contrast of really Mexican luxurious houses, and I don't know, maybe Cuba also has terribly abandoned buildings too, and so it's impossible to compare which abandoned buildings are worse. But the idea that that in a country like this, in America, there is such a discrepancy, it's a little bit tougher to swallow. In Cuba, everybody's evenly poor, so it's a little bit sadder. But in a sense, that's what I meant. Not making any other type of comparison. But yeah, I wonder if I don't know if you clarify anything political for you, the movie itself.
Well, I don't know. I mean, that scene in particularly, I'm visiting that area of Detroit.
We are here now.
Yeah, we haven't seen that part yet.
No, not in this trip. Not in this trip.
Yes, I never saw that in my life. I mean, every time I see images of the U.S. is always luxury or good quality life, but never. I mean, except of course documentaries from 50s and 60s and all these historical movies. But as you know, movies, which is basically what we get the most in the whole world and in Cuba, on Saturdays nights, they show a different country. I never imagined that such a big part of a city in the US would be that abandoned. So yeah, it was pretty clarifying, that part in that moment.
Yeah, I think.
I
Go
think
ahead.
one of the things that was interesting about telling this story this way is that you really have an opportunity to see the U.S. through non-U.S. eyes, through Cuban eyes, and vice versa, right? I mean, Ilmar's Cuban American, so it's not as if it's not my eyes, but there's a way in which I think it becomes much more nuanced than you would. I think it's an opportunity to really look into the nuance of, you know, what works and doesn't work in both countries, and I think that's something we were working towards, and I think it comes through in scenes like that.
I had one more comment on that, Mark. That is one of my favorite scenes. Also, the whole Detroit section, and you know, was really important to us not to sort of play into, you know, poverty porn. We loved our time in Detroit, and it was important to have the Heidelberg project there, as well as the string quartet performing in a beautiful hall, you know, scene at Wayne State. So we didn't cover the whole city, but we wanted to make sure it wasn't just the stuff that ends up on the news. But the other thing I want to say about that is that plays under a very beautiful composition of Aldo's called "Talking to the Universe," which he or someone, like maybe he and Ilmar together, recharted for quintet, for Aldo playing with Ilmar's quartet. I've heard various versions of it, but that particular version to me is really gorgeous. It's got a beautiful classical structure and covers so much, for me, emotional ground, and really allowed us to construct the scene around both some of the pleasures and perils of big city America.
Mm-hmm.
You know what my favorite scene in Detroit was? When we went to Motown and I just did my thing. I wanted to see more of it. Like, that was too short.
But bonus,
I love it. I'm a big fan. And when I saw Michael Jackson's gloves, I'm like, for real? So that was a lot of fun to shoot.
Ilmar, I'll give you more on the bonus extras.
Please.
I ask you, going back to the music for a moment, in the film you say at one point that all of your training was classical. And so my question is, when did you become interested in jazz? And who are the musicians that you listened to or that you were attracted to, or recordings that you were attracted to as you began to sort of extend your musical vocabulary and language beyond your classical training?
That's for you. Is that for me? Oh. Well, it's hard to tell. I mean, when I mean that I was trained in a classical way, is because I went to the school, and what we get there is Western classical academic music. But what it was surrounding us all the time was all this other music we were talking about, all this popular music, dance music. And in Havana, it's very common to have street concerts. So you can hear from your house, basically, many of big concerts in the Malecón or in big stadiums nearby. So I remember since when I was a kid, in the film is captured our first building where we were raised as kids. From there, I remember clearly listening to multiple concerts, big concerts in nearby. There was a stadium, like baseball stadium nearby, and they used to make concerts there. And you could hear pop rock bands, you could hear jazz, Latin jazz bands, you could hear salsa bands. So that was always in my ears, in my listening, wanting it or not. and also in the house, in our family, my grandparents had a traditional trio. They used to sing traditional songs from the traditional music. And my father, Guido, one of his composing signature is bringing elements of traditional music from rumba, from guaguancó, from all these typical dance national music. And in my other side of my music training, I was very into improvising since I was very little. 4 years old, I was already, messing around with my own melodies, with my own singings, and it was kind of a spontaneous, very natural. It was, moving like a river until I arrived in the ocean. And my first experience, as in the film is shown, it was playing jazz was with Chucho Valdez in one of the editions of the Havana Jazz Plaza Festival. And I already had some ideas that improvising was one of the skills I needed to dominar, command to be able to play jazz. And I started little by little, but I actually have to admit that I learned by myself. I never had a formal training on jazz or any other genre, but academic music in the school.
Ilmar, do you improvise?
I improvise a little bit less fluid. I think my excuse is that the violin is such a instrument. You spend most of your life trying to tune the notes that you can read. So imagine if you have any brain power to improvise. I applaud them. But I learned a lot from first from being around Aldo growing up or just visiting in the summer. But then we were lucky enough to play with famous and wonderful jazz players like Chick Corea, Stanley Clarke. And actually, Aldo, Chick would have said that this is the way to learn jazz. I asked Chick many times, can you help me? Can you give me some tips? Like is there any books you want to recommend me to be more fluid in improvisations? And he insisted that jazz is an oral tradition. It's like, if you want to learn, he said, Chick Corea told me, I wanted to learn Cuban music, so I started playing with Mongo Santa Maria in New York. And, the pay was terrible, but I knew I had to immerse myself in the work because you hear it and you do it. When I want to learn flamenco, I went to Spain and I played with the band for a while. And so if you want to play blues, go and just play in a band for a while. So he really, really thinks that he passed recently, but that jazz is an oral tradition more than. Today we have great schools, jazz schools, but he really, really insisted that the way is the ear. And of course, he didn't have this conversation with Aldo, and Aldo didn't have a choice because there was no jazz schools in Cuba, but he did it the right way. Chick would have said, that I told you, that's how to do it. And you come up with your own language. In Aldo's case, to me, it's fascinating because since I remember, he will be learning, let's say, a Chopin etude. And before you know it, he's playing the right hand of that Chopin etude with a different bass that has a beat. The same technical skills that he's learning, but already it's like he couldn't help it but make it his own. And like that, every classical thing he played, like when he was working on some Prokofiev concerto, then you wrote a piece, a musical story that is a bit like Peter and the Wolf, but it's in his own way. So always the classical stuff right away got part of his subconscious or something. So it's a very fluid process with Aldo. The so-called jazz is a mixture of a lot of influences, and a lot of them are classical.
I can encourage people to go to the concert on Saturday night at the Strand Theater in Pontiac, 8 o'clock, to hear both of them play, because what you will hear is essentially all of Aldo's music. So you'll be able to hear that in person. You can also watch the concert virtually. There's the information up on the screen. Tickets for the film and the show, so you can see the film, access to the film at no charge for ticket holders, chambermusicdetroit.org. And all that is left to me to do is to thank both Aldo and Ilmar for not just for this evening, but for sharing your lives and your music with us through the film, to thank Marcia and Ken for making a terrific film and for joining us tonight. I need to remind you that that the film will be opening nationwide next week at art house theaters and the like. I guess we heard earlier that there's a national opening in Los Angeles. And I need to remind everyone that the Freep Film Festival carries on September 22 to the 26th. And I need to thank all of you for tuning in to this conversation tonight and for supporting the film festival over these last, boy, what is it, 5-6 years now? Maybe. I'm not, Kathy or Steve needs to jump in and tell me, but it's been a great ride for the film festival, and it was a privilege for me to be with all of you tonight. So thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you, Mark.